Welcome to Citizen McCain. It is Monday, July 28th. I can't believe it's going to be the end of July pretty soon, beginning of August. I don't know where the hell all this time is going. Thank you all for joining us. Just a reminder, if you're listening on the podcast and you want us to join us on Zoom, you can register to do that at tway.tv/Megan. And if you've not subscribed to our YouTube channel, please do it at youtube.com/@Citizen McCain YouTube. And remember, raise your digital hand if you want to ask us a question. We'd love to hear from you.
Like that.
Just like this, just like go like this. Thank you. And really quick, we are so excited. We're gonna have Ethan Strauss on the show today, and then Vicky Ward. Ethan Strauss, a very famous sports writer and commentator, and Vicky Ward is one of my favorite types of people. She writes and reports on all things conspiracy theory, Epstein, murder. We love these kind of journalists. Very excited to have her come on. Really quickly, Miranda, we've been doing this for like 2.5 years, give or take. I hosted radio with you for like 5 years. We've been on air a lot. Is this my very first sports guest?
Right. Yeah. So yesterday when we were doing our meeting and I was like, what? Boy, we're doing
Like
sports? Like, what are we going to talk about with this guy?
Yeah, so luckily he can talk about anything, but I literally was like, I don't actually know that much about sports. Sadly, I do not. Like
We
I
came up
just
with some stuff. We got some
We
stuff.
did. We are going to. I mean, like, definitely have some things to ask him. But I will candidly say I had to have my husband help me a little bit. Before we start with Ethan, is there anything you want to share about this weekend? Still haven't seen Eddington. Apparently, nobody else is either. It hasn't even made $10 million. It's like this fabulous movie. Yes.
I tried so hard to go see Eddington, and we can call Nick and ask him. Every single movie theater in the Los Angeles area is only playing it at 10:30 at night.
What?
They stopped showing it. I don't know if everyone's going to see the Smurfs. I don't know what's going on, but no one is showing Eddington at any reasonable time, so I'm going to have to wait now. And
You
actually,
can't go at 10:30. That's crazy. It's
no,
like
I
an
will.
almost 3-hour movie.
I will never make
Uh-uh.
it. So I'm considering having one of our friends email our other friends at A24 and ask them for a link
Why don't we do that? Yeah, get
because
screening for the entire
we
team.
need I need
Screeners, yeah.
I need to watch it, and I think I might just have to pull some kind of like rank card because I can't do it. 10:30 at
That's
night's
so
too much.
weird.
It's too much. I
Also,
can't.
we have a lot of like political stuff to obviously get to, but it just makes me really sad that this like really interesting, compelling movie that's all about like the politics of our time and is very fair on hitting both sides and making fun of both sides, and it's like extremely well done, is
With
apparently just
huge stars too, by the
yes.
way. Like,
And it's not doing well. It hasn't even made $10 million yet. And again, I just think all of you are sleeping on this, and I think you should go see it because I do not like superhero movies. Another thing about me that my husband makes so much fun of that I'm like not mainstream about is like I don't watch any Marvel movies, no superhero
me
movies.
either.
I don't do superhero movies. It's not my thing. I get that it's like wildly popular. It's totally fine. Things that are popular are important, and there's nothing wrong with that. But like, I do not watch any superhero movies. I've never even seen the original Superman. I don't give respectfully, like, is not for me. I also am sick of like, again, respect to my husband who went and saw this, but he took my daughter to see Kung Fu Panda 5. All these movies make tons of money, but like this beautiful little art house movie that's like this really interesting criticism of like Americana, like political like moments is like tanking. You guys go see Eddington. It's very good. And I want Ari Aster to make
But
more
it's like
movies. But I'm like,
everyone wants to bitch and moan about how there's no original content anymore and everyone's
totally,
just making reboots and remakes
totally.
and Marvel Iron Man versus Superman in the Thunderdome, and it's like, okay, then go see Eddington. Please
Yeah.
contribute your
So I'm
funds to these. So it's like I tried desperately. I will Venmo
you
A24
have a
the
pass.
$35. I will send them the money. Just send me the link, please. For the love of God, send me the movie because I want to
I'm
watch it.
just saying that we have had a lot of data and research done on our audience, and our audience tends to be basically just Miranda and I cloned. So if you're like Miranda and I, you like these kind of movies. So please, just like I said, go see it. I just felt really sad this weekend when I saw that it's not doing well because I was like, I just feel like every movie I like and really enjoy is like this. It's like this like art movie that like is like really intense, and then nobody sees it, and then I have to sit through the Fantastic 30 with, I just don't give a shit about these
Not
fucking.
seeing it. No,
I don't care.
I saw Iron
Anyway,
Man 1 when it came out and I said not for me. I saw the first Harry Potter when it came out and I said not for me. And that's it. I just no. I don't
final
like it.
thing, because I understand our guest is here, which we're excited about, but I will
Yeah.
say I saw our old girl Tulsi Gabbard over the weekend. Wonderful to
How's she
see her. Obviously,
doing?
I'm not trying to name drop. She's doing so good.
Okay,
Except she
good.
has more, like, she has, it's just weird to have your friend have security. Like, it's just a new vibe.
That's gotta
Anyway,
be odd. Yeah. Okay.
yes, it's but understandable. She's a very important job. But she told me there is a new Jason Momoa Hawaii show coming out on Apple about like the original Hawaiian War, when like colonial people came over to try and like take over the Hawaiian Islands. And I saw the trailer for it and it looks fabulous. So,
Huh.
and it comes out on Friday, and I think it's called like God of War or something. Anyway, Ashley will look it up. I'm sorry, Ashley, this is like off topic, but I will watch that too. So it looks really good. It's about like Hawaiian
The
natives.
princesses
Right.
and all that
Yeah.
stuff. Yeah, the queens
Chief
and all
of
that.
War. I'm so sorry. It's called Chief of War. Anyway, all right.
Fabulous. I'll watch
So
anything on Apple TV Plus. They make the best stuff. Oh my gosh.
totally. So we'll
Hmm
watch that. Go see Eddington, you guys. Our guest is here. Please see Eddington.
Please,
Thank you so
we
much.
love to do TV talk. So
Yes.
anyway, let's ask Ethan what he's watching. Ethan, what are you
Ethan,
watching?
thank you so much for coming on. Our co-friend at Two Way, co-host at Two Way. Ethan
Yes.
writes the wildly popular Substack House of Strauss and hosts his own two-way show Random Offense, which airs at 4 p.m. Eastern on Fridays. You can catch him at Sherwood Strauss on X. Ethan, just really quick, have you seen Eddington?
I haven't. I want to. I'm very intrigued by it. I have just been observing people getting offended about it because they think it's about them and they think that you should not be allowed to be offended. So I'm intrigued, but with two small children, it's hard to schedule. I want to see
Thank
it though.
you.
I mean, Ethan, we all have two small children, but thank you so much. I really suggest I suggest you see it. Really quick, my husband, who I believe you have done interviews with before,
Yeah.
when I told him this morning that I was interviewing you, he was like, God damn it, that's awesome. Have so
Oh,
much fun. He loves you. We are all big fans of yours, obviously, but I think you're our first sports guest. I mean, you're obviously you comment on politics and culture as well, but we have quite a few sports questions to ask you, if you don't mind, before we get into some politics of the day. But I
mhm.
just have to ask you, because I'm from Phoenix, Arizona, which everybody knows who listens to the show. And when I was growing up, the Suns were golden gods in Arizona. This was like the
Yeah.
Charles Barkley, Kevin Johnson, Dan Marley, like the era. King Charles is still like one of my favorite people that have ever lived. I think he's a genius. Apparently, he is moving on from TNT in his commentating job. Do you remember that era of the Suns? Does King
Yeah.
Charles mean as much to you? And what do you think of him moving on from TNT?
Oh, I mean, that's a lot right there. I remember it. I was a little kid, but I didn't quite have a full grasp of Barkley's charisma until he became a television personality on TNT. And then the Suns, I mean, what's sad about the Suns is they had that almost this renaissance with Steve Nash, and they had that, didn't they have the
Yeah.
Dan Marley's bar around the arena,
Yes.
and the scene was really hopping, and it's gotten very depressing. As I'm depressed about moving on and the whole, I mean, I want it to end. I know that they're basically trying to reboot it on ESPN, and I just don't think it is going to be completely the same. Barkley's had about 1 foot in and 1 foot out, and I just want as much Barkley as we can get because he's just one of the funniest non-comedian Americans. If you're going non-comics Mount Rushmore, he has to be on there.
Yeah.
He's
Yes.
so, and I almost want it studied. He's so effortlessly funny. And I would recommend it to anybody. Back when Barkley had a better relationship going with Michael Jordan, they're trying to patch things up now. They're at loggerheads. That's a different topic. There's an Oprah episode from maybe about 20 years ago, something like that, with him and Michael Jordan and Barkley just roasting Jordan, which you never see. You just never see Michael Jordan getting made fun of on Oprah. It is a tremendous clip. If ever you've got some time to procrastinate, go to YouTube and check that out. Love Barkley. Yeah, it's sad. End of an era.
Do you
Why
think
do
that
you
he and
go ahead?
Shaq will stay together though? Because they're pretty hysterical together.
Yeah, they've been hysterical together for a long time. And I mean, I don't know how much your audience wants to get into all of this. I'm fascinated by how that show came to be. I think in some incarnation, in some iteration, I don't believe that Barkley will be kept away from the cameras. I don't see him as somebody who's just going to disappear and we'll never hear from him again. He loves the talk. He loves to be a celebrity. I think he's going to do things with Shaq in perpetuity. That's what I would imagine.
They're
He's
such a great
just
pair. Yeah.
such a great pair. But I think it's, the story of them and that show, it's almost a story about production. You've been in the TV world. You understand it. You understand that there's a lot that goes into making somebody their best version of themselves. I think what's interesting about that show is that they had Shaq and it was very clunky at first. It
Mhm.
wasn't working at first. And producers had to figure out because they knew they had this vision. They knew the people who hired Shaq and brought him on that show did so because they saw Barkley and Shaq interact with each other outside an arena and curse at each other and fake wrestle and fight each other. And they said, we've got to get a hold of this. We've got to harness this. This is gold. But when they brought Shaq on, he was very insecure and he wasn't very good on that show. Part of the secret of Barkley is that he is very comfortable being made fun of and being the butt of the joke. Shaq, Shaq is not. That's not Shaq, even if Shaq's also funny. And some genius producer there, they found the mechanism by which to launch Shaq and by which to make Shaq make sense to America. They invented a little, what am I going to call it? Segment. Yes, segment called Shaqtin' a Fool. They went, look, Shaq's a bit of a middle school bully. So what we're going to do, we're going to play the week's bloopers, and he's going to be a middle school bully, and he's going to make fun of the player for slipping on a banana peel or whatever. And that segment, Shaqtin' a Fool, allowed Shaq to get comfortable, allowed him to ease into his dynamic with Barkley, where they're fighting each other and arguing on there. And I just find that interesting from a behind the scenes perspective. The unsung heroes, the producers who figure out a way to make the personalities what they end up meaning to everybody watching.
Yeah, and a lot of times, sometimes people that are larger than life try and host things and they are terrible. And then sometimes you think people are not going to be good at hosting things are incredible. I just
Yeah.
remember that from the thousands of shows I've co-hosted, and sometimes the biggest celebrities are the worst, like, respectfully. Just, they don't want to piss anybody off. They're like, whatever, which I totally understand. Just one more question about Charles Barkley. Obviously, like I said, I'm from Phoenix, he's from Phoenix. Like, just, like, I used to go to the games all the time when I was younger. He's a real, he's just a titan in all places, but particularly in Arizona. Why is it that even like younger generations, because again, he was big when I was young and I'm 40, still love him? Is it just because he's so funny, he's so larger than life? Because I really do feel like he's this figure that's just universally beloved, despite the fact that he'll talk about politics, which I appreciate too. It's a really hard thing to pull off, but everybody loves him.
I mean, there's so much going on. I think few people who become famous are comfortable with fame. He enjoys being famous in an easy way. He loves being the life of the party. After a game between the Thunder and the Warriors, we the TNT guys were in town and I was covering that game. And at the hotel bar, he just shut it down. And he's Barkley times 10 in person and doesn't mind that everybody is gravitating to him. He's not weirded out by it. And he's raunchy and he's he crosses some lines. There are some taboos. He really goes for it in public and isn't worried about the ramifications. And I think that's quite rare. And also, we just can't make fame anymore. We can't do it. We can't do it like we did it. We made him famous in the pre-social media era. Who are the most famous NBA players still playing? It's the guys who became famous before Twitter reached critical mass. That would be Steph Curry, LeBron James, those guys.
Mhm.
I think Taylor Swift's concert tour was such a big deal in part because she's the youngest person to become truly famous pre-social media. We can't do it again. We can't make fame again. We can make somebody who is, yes, famous, but they're not necessarily going to be somebody that your mom knows and also somebody who's a teenager knows. We can't do it.
Yeah.
It's just the different media environment. So one of the reasons why we're not seeing the standard life cycle take place, whether it's in politics, the gerontocracy, or on ESPN, is that we can't really find somebody to replace a Charles Barkley when Charles Barkley is ready to retire. It's just impossible. Nobody's that big anymore.
Yeah, and I think I just have one more question on 90s sports stars. Dennis Rodman was also like one of the biggest figures of my like memory when I was again like in my formative years. And obviously he like dated Madonna and wore wedding dresses, and he was just really eccentric and over the top. I can remember watching, I believe it was the 30 for 30 documentary about about Michael Jordan. My husband's gonna kill me.
The
He made me
Last
watch it. It
Dance?
was so good. The Last Dance. It was fantastic. But one of the things I didn't know is just that like Dennis Rodman was a mess. Like he was like on drugs, and like the
Oh
coaches had to
yeah.
like go to Vegas. I don't know how you can be a professional athlete and like party as hard as he did. Is that something that's like unique to that time? And why is Dennis Rodman still not in the zeitgeist the way that a Charles Barkley, a Shaq is, a Michael Jordan?
Well, I mean, multiple good questions there. I think one of the
Sorry, I
reasons why
always ask like 50 questions, which
no,
is a critique of our friend Mark Halperin, who helps run everything. He's always like, stop asking 30 questions at once.
well, no, they're all good questions at least. Why isn't he in the zeitgeist? I don't think he's much of a talker. I think a lot of the way that he got attention back then and cut through was visual and just being shocking. I don't think it was gift of gab necessarily. And in this era, you should have a podcast, you should have a platform. I don't think Rodman necessarily had that. Now, what was the other question? I feel like Rick Perry. I
The
can't remember the
the
third. What was
drugs thing. How was
The
he able
drugs,
to
yeah.
how was he
okay.
able to party and
Not
perform at that
necessarily
level?
not necessarily unusual. Great question. For whatever reason, the defensive superstars of the NBA, and I've always wondered about the science of this, they're often drunks, for lack of a better term.
Huh.
Wow.
And it's almost like they've got something burning and pulsating within themselves that they need the depressant to quell it. I don't know. It's crazy. Now, I'm not going to call him a drunk. He's a modern player. For all I know, he lives very clean. But I remember covering the Warriors, Draymond Green, best defensive player of this generation. I remember we were covering a playoff series early in his career, and we were in New Orleans, and people were saying, dude, he was out at Harrah's till 4 a.m., and he
Wow.
was just going crazy. And then we're watching the playoff game, and he's kicking Anthony Davis's ass. Anthony Davis, one of the best players, 7 feet tall. Draymond, more like 6'5". We asked him after the game. I don't know what your cursing policy is, but we were asking
Could
him.
swear.
Say whatever you want.
Could
Okay,
swear.
that's good. No, that's good. We were asking because we were saying we noticed that Anthony Davis is fading out in the fourth quarter, and maybe he's winning the battle against you, but he just in the series, he keeps fading out and you're still there in the fourth quarter. And he went, "Oh, why? Because I'm all heart, motherfucker." And just like bellows and pounds
Like
his
Jerry
chest.
Maguire.
He's just like, there's just something, there's this demon energy. And a lot of the great defensive players have had that sort of party all night and just be completely no worse for it, and maybe even be stronger and have more stamina than the guys they're guarding. Ron Artest was somebody who drank before games. He was one of the best defensive players of his era. That's another example in addition to Rodman. I can't tell you what the science is behind that. I generally don't advise people live that way. And in a way, you are right that it is fading out. I think players are living cleaner. I think that they're optimizing more. One of the reasons is that the way they get sex, frankly, is not going to nightclubs. It's via the apps.
Yeah.
So, in order to meet women, they don't have to party all night to do that, or they're not going to party all night to do that. They're going to order it like room service to their hotel on the road. So a lot of that lifestyle is fading out. But for whatever reason, defensive players, man, I don't know why. I don't know how. But Rodman, he might be unusual in how great he was, but he wasn't unusual in the sense of being an awesome defensive player who partied like crazy.
Well, and it goes back to what you were saying about social media. These guys just can't because there's phones and there's cameras and their eyes on them anywhere they go. And then as far as Dennis Rodman, isn't he pushing his daughter? Like, isn't he trying to make her the new famous
soccer?
Rodman? Yeah, with the soccer and stuff. Isn't she on the women's world team or something like that?
Yeah, I mean, that's outside my
I don't actually
purview.
know.
Yeah,
I'm
I've
not
been
sure.
hearing a lot of her name a lot lately.
Yeah. I mean, he's just a fascinating guy, and I think an interesting one to bring up. And one of the reasons I really like Chuck Klosterman's book in the 1990s,
It's a great
Klosterman's,
book.
it's so good. And his view that he took with it is, I'm not focusing on the stuff that became bigger later on, because our view of history can be skewed in that way. We take what's relevant today and we look at how it started and we really focus on that. I'm just going to talk about what was big back then without regard to the future. And I think Dennis Rodman is one of those guys where somebody young today could not even imagine how famous that guy was and what a
Oh
big
yeah.
deal he was. And he's one of the people that kind of faded out, whereas some other people continued on. And that makes him even more of a curiosity and somebody I would enjoy an exploration of.
Madonna in one of her documentaries said he was the best sex she ever had. So, I mean,
Ooh.
no problem, Dennis Rodman. I know I am a connoisseur of pop
No,
culture
I
and
read
Madonna. I
that
may not be
crazy.
sports.
I remember being a kid reading that crazy book. I don't know how old I was. I might have been 12. It had different fonts, the Dennis Rodman book, where he's naked on the cover and he's
Yes.
describing his sexual encounters with Madonna. And I just remember being a kid reading it and going, "Oh my God, this is
And like,
crazy."
what is this?
You're like, I probably should not be reading this.
Insane.
Yeah.
What's
Yeah.
happening? Yeah, totally. The much more innocent time for all of us collectively. I don't know how old you are, but it's definitely a different time. Um, Ethan, what made you love sports so much that you wanted to just dedicate your whole life to covering it, discussing it? I know you particularly love basketball because people ask me this about politics, and I'm like, there was no other choice. I was just
Mhm.
ensconced by it. I don't know how to do anything else. How did you come to this as a career?
Yeah, I don't know if I consciously chose to do this. It was a bit of happenstance, but I did love basketball and I love the NBA. I think in a very cliche way, I had a certain struggle with communicating with my dad, and my parents were divorced, and it was hard to really forge a relationship. We're good now. I would advocate to anybody. This is a very strange digression right here, but if you've got an issue with a family member and you are now an adult, and they're not a bad person, forgive them. Forgive them,
Hmm.
and I think that's just a tremendously great thing, even if it wasn't great for one's own mental health. I think it's great to do in general, and so we're good now. But that was back then about the only thing we could really share and enjoy together. He was a massive New York Knicks fan, so I just had great memories of waking up at 9 a.m. on the West Coast to watch one of those matinees between the Pacers and the Knicks and just be with my dad in a very uncomplicated way and where he was really, really happy. And so I loved the game. I was just, white point guard who shot threes, and I didn't exactly attain any sort of mastery of it. And then I just was looking for fodder. I loved writing when I was at the Daily Cal. College paper. I wanted to cover sports because I just felt comfortable talking about it. And that's one of the great and terrible things about sports is everybody feels like they're an expert. Everybody, if they watch it, has an opinion on it.
Except me and Miranda.
And I even worked
That's
at Fox
why.
Sports and I still feel terrible talking about sports. Yeah.
Well, I commend you on your humility.
Thank
And
you.
I don't know if we need to get into my whole origin stories, but
Fair.
I just heard that there was a job at the NBA when I was in college and I didn't want to be a lawyer where it was called media monitoring, which sounds very Orwellian. And it was. We were basically reading literally everything about the NBA and then sending a memo about it to the commissioner of the NBA. And you could do that back then. You could read literally everything about the NBA on the internet. The internet was that small back then. And I saw that people were going to games and sitting courtside, and their job was just to talk about this. And it seemed a lot better than my job. So that's how this whole thing got started. But I didn't expect it to take off, and I didn't expect it to become my life. I'm happy it happened, but it's not like I ever said, this will be me one day, and this is definitely what I'm going to do. It was a little more accidental than that. I mean,
Is it
I will say,
hard?
I'll say as an aside, there was a moment where it was going to be this or politics. And
Sure.
I chose sports. This sounds crazy. I was at salon.com, Megan, back in the day, maybe around.
Were you there with Jake Tapper when he was there?
No, but I was there with Steve Kornacki back
Oh,
then.
we love
wow.
him.
Love Steve Kornacki.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I was almost like his. I wouldn't say that I was his intern or his gopher because he was in New York and I was in San Francisco. But on the morning call, he would want things and we would try to work to get it for him. And he was great back then as he's great today. And Salam was less ideological. It was liberal, but it was a different time. It was a much different time in 2010 in ways that are hard to explain. But I also liked writing about politics and I had a choice. They promoted me from weekend editor to a 50-hour a week sort of position. And I had seen some of the ugliness. And at that time, I was going to Warriors games and writing for the Warriors World blog on the side. And I knew it had to be one or the other. And I just reasoned that as much as the politics might actually matter more and mean more. I
No way.
enjoyed the show business weirdness of the NBA, and it seemed miserable. So I told Joan Walsh or whoever I told that I wasn't going to go into the position, and I quit 2 weeks in, and I chose the path I'm on, which has led me back to quasi politics, I guess.
Well, I was gonna say, sports isn't devoid of politics. I would prefer my sports and entertainment political free. And the commentary about how much, we're in the Colbert land of like, his show got canceled, I think in no small part because of how much he hates Republicans. That's just my personal opinion. Um, but I do, sports for a time has been at the center of a lot of like political strife. How much of that was the players, or how much of it, I would always feel bad for like people who do not want to be political or who are not
Yeah.
experts, that journalists put cameras in their face and they're like, comment on on Israel, whatever, and they're
Yeah.
like, this is not the lane I'm in. How much of it was driven by journalists
Oh,
forcing people into those places?
so much by journalists. That's my perspective on it. This is a bit of a subjective. I can't give you a percentage. I can't let you know for sure. Nobody knows, but it's what I observed. As an example, an object example, Steph Curry taking off as a superstar around 2016, 2017, and people know he's very religious. And the bathroom bill in North Carolina, where he's from, becomes a thing. Now,
Mhm.
I'm no expert on the bathroom bill. That's how it was known colloquially. As you well know, any state law has all these weird nooks and crannies. And
Mhm.
I remember reading about it and trying to read up on it to understand it and going, I'm not completely sure all the contours of what this does, but it becomes this big controversy. And journalists are asking Steph, and I'm just on the road at all these games in the locker room, and I'm just watching them try to get his position on it and get him to come out against the bill and just beat on him and beat on him and beat on him. And being around Steph, good guy. I wouldn't say that he's somebody who was just reading position papers in depth. I wouldn't say that that was how his mind worked. I would say that he's math smart. He likes that he's born on Pi Day. He's not tremendously invested in politics, even if he did via video, whatever, speak at the recent Democratic National Convention. But back then, there was no political valence at all. And it was just pressure, 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 pressure until finally the desired result. Finally, I think he said something that would indicate that he was against it. Forgive me if I'm getting it wrong, but I just saw that dynamic in person where the journalists desperately want the athletes to mirror their own views back to themselves. And I think that there are a few reasons for that. One is a logical reason, which is that if you're an activist, athletes are cool. They're powerful mimetic
Mhm.
models. If they start doing something, other people think it's a good idea. So there's a logic of activism to it, but then there's just this weird narcissism to a lot of people where they've got a parasocial relationship with the athlete. They like and admire the athlete. They watch them on TV. They feel like they know the athlete. And even without knowing they're doing it, they almost tell themselves a story about the athlete as though the athlete is like somebody that they went to college with and dorm with and has their values. And if the athletes are saying things that don't align, then there's this discomfort and this anger and almost bullying to sort of be the person I want you to be.
Yeah.
And the truth of it is that culture is so different from the culture of salon.com when I was there or Yelp when I briefly worked at Yelp. It's just the energy is different. What you hear is different. Charles Barkley once said, the aforementioned Charles Barkley, the locker room, it's racist, it's sexist, it's homophobic, and I miss it. I mean, that's the locker room. It's a different
Mhm.
thing. You get fired, HR situation, every single millisecond in there. The values of the players are different in there. They're shaped by a different reality. It's a Darwinian just crucible in a way. It's kill or be killed. It's I succeed, I make hundreds of millions of dollars. I fail, I get sent home. And that sort of perspective in professional sports, it's not the perspective of people with the be kind bumper stickers.
Mhm.
I don't know if we want to call it conservative just because that's confusing nowadays and it's all been confounded, but it's not touchy feely. And the people who have to live according to those rules, they often have a perspective on life that is out of alignment with progressive journalists in any sport.
Hmm.
Even if the NBA is more Democrat tilting than some of the other sports, the values are just quite different.
Yeah, I also think it's been so interesting too. I don't want to police anyone's room, and I like in the sense like I don't want to police how people blow off steam in a locker room. I don't think that's my role in general. And I think for me, even in just working in different shows that I've worked on, unless there's like trust and true off the record, like, you know, understanding that sometimes people are going to say things that are going to offend each other. It to me, it has created work environments that were just so tense that people worked less well. Like they
Yeah.
just weren't as loose, they weren't as interesting. You know, their commentary was so reserved that it became stale. And I don't like any of that stuff. So I don't have a problem with athletes within reason. You know, I don't want anyone doing anything that's insane, but like I don't really like to like I have four brothers. Like I know how men talk and all of them are in the military except
Should
one.
hear
Like I
our
like
pre-show
yeah, like
meetings.
like I really yeah, so I don't mind it. Also Steph Curry, do you know how I know Steph Curry? Because his wife, because she, you know, she's like a big figure with like, you know, she has like a line at Target of like cooking wear and
Mhm.
whatever. So I knew her before I knew him. Again, please don't judge that. But they're really like present themselves like America's sweethearts couple. And I can see how anything political would be complicated. And I was actually surprised when they came out and endorsed at the convention because,
Mm,
as Michael Jordan says, my favorite quote, Republicans buy sneakers too. It didn't make me not like her or anything. I was just
yeah.
surprised they got as political as they did. We have a question from Jeremy, I believe, who wants to ask you a question. Oh, hi, Jeremy. How are
Hey,
you?
Hey,
Hi,
Jeremy.
Jeremy.
Megan. Hello. Hey,
Hello.
thanks for calling on me. Ethan, been a huge fan for a long time. Paid subscriber to your Substack for a long
Thank you.
time. Um, yeah, so I come at this as primarily a baseball guy. I've been a sabermetrics devotee since I discovered Bill James back in 1986. Look behind me. There's a row of book. There's two rows on my bookshelf dedicated to Bill James and baseball prospectus and other
Love Bill
things.
James.
Um, so I come at this more as like an outside observer to what's going on with the NBA.
Hmm.
Um, and so I've been fascinated. A lot of what I know about the analytic revolution in the NBA have basically learned through your Substack over the last couple of years.
Hmm.
Is there any form of like real counter revolution brewing to the analytics wave in the NBA? Or whether it's specifically like trying to go back to the mid-range or someone trying to make a traditional big man work, or is it something that more like baseball where everyone has surrendered to mostly, even if they complain about it?
Okay, so that's a good question. And for our hosts here, I would say that I can broaden it out so it's not too nitty-gritty sports and say this is a broader
It's fine.
problem of optimization of pursuits somehow completely destroying the pursuits. That once people figure out how to game a system, it ruins the system in a way. And I think in sports, there's no revolution within the sport or within the NBA, it's the rule makers. All you can really do once people figure out how to game the system in a way that is not so appealing. And in this case, to explain it to everybody, it's shooting a ton of 3 pointers and trying to get fouled as much as possible. That's how you game the system. And it creates a product that is not as aesthetically pleasing, but that's the logic. It makes sense. The problem isn't that it doesn't work, the problem is that it does work. All you can really do is start changing the rules to make it harder to game in that particular way. And I think the NBA is looking at those. I think baseball has also changed rules to try to make things more aesthetically pleasing because, for instance, they were doing all these crazy shifts because the analytics said to do them. And it was the smart thing to do, but people don't like that. They don't like watching a guy hit a ball 112 miles an hour up the middle and there are two fielders right there ready to catch it. They don't like that. So I think that that's just going to continue. I think that's part of an evolving conversation in sports about whether you should allow somebody to continue to do something because they earned it and they figured it out, or you should get rid of it because it's gross. In football, it's the tush push. That's one where there's all this debate about whether you let this rugby play continue or whether you get it out of here because it looks bad. But I'm mostly on the side of get it out of here if it looks bad. It's show business, baby. It's sports. It's not just the purity of the game. You have to be entertaining. And if people are making something not entertaining, I think you got to step in.
Thank you, Jeremy. So nice to see you. Come back
So,
soon. Glad you're a huge fan of Ethan's. All the men in my life are. Jeremy's a friend. Thank you. Ethan, I want to ask you about Caitlin Clark, if you don't mind, and the WNBA. Over the last week, All-Star Weekend, Caitlin Clark spoke out about players getting played. They wore shirts that said, I believe, pay us what we're owed, pay us fair.
Yeah.
The league revenue and ratings have surged over the last 2 years, with TV rights and deals around $2.2 billion and ratings increasing across all networks like ESPN more than 170%. I was shocked to hear she only makes $78,000 a year, which is very low given like her caliber of athlete. And I don't know what I'm talking about. Do you think that they should be paid more, and do you think they're going to get paid more?
Okay, so this is a little bit confusing. How do I make this make sense to everybody?
Sure.
Yes, that's way too little to pay Caitlin Clark. Way too little. The complicating factor in this, and I thought it was interesting that they had those shirts that said "Pay us what we're owed."
Thank you. Pay us what we're owed.
I think that's the case. I always get song lyrics wrong, and that's off the top of my head.
It
So
says
it's
something like "pay us," pay us our
Yeah,
worth.
that
or
was
something.
that was the gist. Yeah.
that
Yeah.
was the gist. What's interesting to me about that is literally nobody can tell you the answer to what they're owed. That person does not exist. And why is that the case? It's because the WNBA acts as subsidiary to the broader NBA. The WNBA has been losing money for many years, but it's been propped up like an NGO by the NBA. Now the WNBA is getting respectable viewership and there's interest in it. A lot of it revolves around Caitlin Clark, who's been getting injured recently and maybe isn't the surefire phenomenon that we might have thought she was. But let's just set that aside. The bottom line is that the WNBA is getting interest in accordance with a league that could perhaps make money, but we don't know. We have no way of knowing because it's all tangled together like the wires behind, since we were talking about the 90s and 90s television set. We don't know what money's getting spent. We don't know what money's coming in. There are reports in the New York Post that they're losing tens of millions of dollars every year. I do find that to be plausible, but they've got all this TV money coming in. That sounds great, except the TV money is coming from all the people who are also paying the NBA. So it's just part of a whole bundle, as it were. And so, yes, they should be getting paid more money. No, nobody has any idea how much money that should be.
I don't know. It seems like a forensic accountant could figure this out.
I mean, in theory, but this sports business, it's just not like a regular business. It gets to be all shadowy and shady in a different way. And
Also,
you have no
like,
shareholders either. Yeah.
Shane Gillis made a joke at the ESPYs that, like, he made a joke and he was like, look at this WNBA star, and the entire room starts clapping, and then it's just his friend's wife.
Yeah.
It's like, and he makes a joke and he's like, see, none of you watch the NBA. You don't even know who that is. Like, I'm sure there are people watching, but I am not going to delude myself to think that, like, whatever, like, it has anywhere near the same level of ratings and fandom that the NBA does. And go ahead.
It doesn't, but there are a lot of uncomfortable things for the people running the WNBA in regards to its popularity. The WNBA has been getting more popular recently. A lot of that is because of Caitlin Clark. That's just objective. We can look at it. Everybody knows it. But there's been so much resentment, not only of her within the WNBA, but of the fans she's bringing in, because it has been run like an NGO and it hasn't been about the money or the popularity. And even if you theoretically want more audience, the types of people who are now watching the WNBA are resented by WNBA culture.
Why?
People. A lot of them are men. That's number one. More men
Okay.
watch the WNBA than women. And gambling, I think, has created a whole new way to engage with the WNBA. And you have people coming over from Barstool betting on this sport, and it's the wrong kind of people. Or from the view of a lot of people within the WNBA, MAGA type people, evil Republicans who've been brought in by Caitlin Clark and just care about her. So there's this resentment of the kind of viewer. And I think this is just a broader situation in sports that I've talked about, where a lot of people running sports have somebody in mind as their ideal customer. And when the actual customer shows up, they hate that and they can't cope with it. And it should just be about the money, but it's not just about the money. They've got somebody in mind. They want to like their sport. And the other major sports, unlike the WNBA, it's somebody who's urbane and somebody who's cosmopolitan. And when it's actually Jersey Jerry from Barstool, they don't like that, even if it's clearly what the customer base is.
It's interesting. I only know 3 players. I know obviously Caitlin. I know Angel Reese because they're always fighting. And that's the only reason why I know who she is. Again, respectful. I'm not a sports person. And I know Brittany Griner because obviously we traded a terrorist to get her back here, to get her back from being in a Russian prison. Those are the only 3 players I know. And again, like I know if you said Megan, gun to your head, you need to name 15 NBA players, I could. Like, so there is a difference and I'm not a sports person. So I do think I don't like when women go into spaces and say, I automatically have to get paid as much, like prove that you are like that you can bring the ratings and you can bring the goods or whatever, bring the whatever. I don't know. I don't think it helps women to be like, you have to pay me simply because I am a woman. Like, I don't know that's how I feel.
It can kind of work though. It seemed like with the U.S. national team in soccer, that strategy worked and the men ultimately caved and they ceded money.
But weren't they winning and the men weren't? Like they were outperforming the men's team?
Sure, they were playing against women. They were outperforming or doing better than the men's team, but I don't know if the men had to do that. Now, that was also, I can't remember what year that exactly happened, but things have changed. The vibe has shifted. So that sort of pressure, that sort of media pressure, it might not hit as hard as it did back then. What's interesting to me about the WNBA, you mentioned the players you've named. Almost nobody talks about the best player in the WNBA.
Who's the best player?
Nafisa Collier of the
Okay.
Minnesota Lynx. She is the best player. Asia Wilson has been promoted as the best player. Nike has done this huge campaign for her. I don't think she's going to sell many shoes. I just don't think that there's much interest there. But that was the WNBA culture answer to Caitlin Clark is Asia Wilson, who was MVP last season, but I don't think that she's maintaining the same standard. Nafisa Collier, the best player in the WNBA, and just, I don't know. I don't know why she's a non-entity in what's discussed, but I also think there's some cultural discomfort there with Nafisa Collier. She's a mom, which I think is really cool. She had a child recently, about a couple years ago, and has gotten into form. I don't know if anybody cares that her husband is white. I don't know. I'll just throw that out there, waiting for it to get aggregated as, I'm some sort of monster for observing that. I don't think that there's hatred of her. I think there's resentment of Caitlin Clark. That's obvious and all the attention. I wouldn't say it's the same thing with Collier, but it just seems like that's a league that has a lot of trouble promoting anybody, but it's ideal and its archetype it has in mind for who the right kind of WNBA player is.
They respectfully have to get the fuck over that. I mean, like, no, I mean, really, like there was a comedian and I forgot his name now, but he said something like he was pissed only women were coming to his comedy. And he basically said like, I want the Joe Rogan audience. And women stopped going to his comedy and now he's not selling as much. And I apologize, forgot his name. I just know he's very handsome. And that's part of the reason why women wanted to see him. And I will find out his name before the show is over. But it's like, I have a friend who's a female comedian and she resented that. And she was like, I have a lot of women and moms that come to my show. And she's like, I'm happy for anybody who is buying a ticket and coming because I've got to pay my mortgage and whatever. This is my living. And I just feel like, obviously because like I'm a Republican, this idea that like our fandom, our money, our presence is unwarranted someplace, I just find so insulting. And this is someone who like, unfortunately for me, the content I tend to like in film and culture and everything is not done by conservatives. Total respect. I just can't live my life watching like, Tim Allen movies all day long. It's not logical.
Well, you asked a question earlier that I didn't answer about what I'm watching on TV. And I had this exact issue. I was really interested in the Owen Wilson vehicle on Apple TV, Stick.
Oh, Stick, yeah.
Yeah, I was really interested in it. It seemed like it was the perfect role for him as a washed-up golfer trying to help a young golfer make the big time. But it had that issue again, that issue of a resentment of one's base. And I don't want to get too granular about the show, but the show fairly early on depicts these evil, terrible, as they call it, golf bros at the pro shop sexually harassing a waitress. And people at numerous times in the show say, I hate golf bros. And I'm just watching it and I'm going, I don't know. I just don't understand this sort of outlook. Maybe that's what's fashionable among the people who make a show like this. I know Owen Wilson's a big golf fan and a golf nut, but maybe to get everybody else on board and get everybody in the writer's room, you have to performatively hate the people involved in this sport and depict them in this negative, pejorative, cartoonish way. And you just see that sort of thing happen and you wonder, I think it offends my sensibilities just because I think it's wrong. I just don't think that's true. But B, it's just financially stupid. And I think that's what's characterized a lot of the social media era is the elevation of social incentive above financial incentive, especially in art. People make a choice because they want to get in good with their social strata, and they will make that choice even if it's completely destroying their publication or TV show. And I just felt like that was another example of it.
Yeah, and that is one of the topics you have just recently written about in your Substack, and we've been talking about on the show, which is obviously the cancellation of Stephen Colbert. And my old friend Jay Leno did an interview over the weekend talking about how, you can't get political. He gave political jokes, but you have to be fair on both sides. And then he said TV hosts are, quote, fools for falling back on one-sided political humor. And he argued that they are isolating half their audience with endless partisan jabs. I'm not trying to humble brag. Jay Leno was a really big part of my career when I was in my 20s. I was a contributor on the Jay Leno show, if you guys remember what that was, between when he was hosting the Late Show the Tonight Show, and then hosted it again when there was the Conan dispute. And I was a guest on his show. It is something crazy, like 30 something times. He just liked me. Like, I think I was like a young person who could talk about politics, but it wasn't so much that was like going to scare everybody. And he's someone I consider a friend. I have his phone number in my phone. We're trying to get him on the show, but his wife has been ill and I think he's not doing a ton of interviews, which is totally fine. I love Jay Leno because he would have everybody on. He would have Barack Obama on. He would have Ted Cruz on. He would have anybody he would have on. And I always loved that his producers understood that America likes different kinds of people. I think part of the reason why Colbert is getting canceled, it's obviously financial, but I think we can't not look at the fact that the New York Post had a headline on Friday that said that he had like 186 Democrats and one Republican
Yeah.
in the last it's like crazy.
Yeah.
What is your takeaway on like the future of entertainment like that? Because like you said, I would probably say like a great majority of people in entertainment would rather have, like you said, a very specific kind of audience than a massive audience, and apparently still have a show that's on the air.
Yeah. This is the big, I call it, I've got my best friend I sometimes have on my podcast. He's a very lefty guy. He's a Hollywood writer. And we call this the wokeness versus brokenness argument about, is the problem with what they're producing for us structural, and digital and Netflix and everything else just killing these industries? And there's nothing you could do about it. And maybe Stephen Colbert was doing the best one could do, just getting a boomer lib audience and getting nearly 2 million people watching, and actually being political was what was keeping him afloat, versus if he was trying to be all things to all people, then he wouldn't have his own niche audience. That's an argument. I get it, but maybe try the other thing first and we can find out. I just don't see anybody in these positions even trying it. And it goes back to that elevation over the social over the financial, where Jimmy Fallon pats Trump's head and it's a complete firestorm. Everybody in
He
his
still hasn't
social
recovered
milieu
from that. Yeah.
rejecting him. And I think that's what they're afraid of. That's what they're avoiding. That's why they're making their decisions. It's not about what's the most entertaining. It's not about what people want to see. I do think people want to see both sides. I think that's one of the reasons why Bill Maher's show has continued to survive. It's one of the few places in America where live on TV, you can see people from both sides arguing with each other.
Mm-hmm.
And some of these successful podcasts right now, they're not just having politicians from one side. You can say that Joe Rogan tilts right nowadays, but he'll have people from both sides. Andrew Scholes had Ezra Klein on, for instance. He's interviewed Donald Trump as well and said he voted for Donald Trump. That's fundamentally more interesting than just having a partisan slant. in a position or an institution that is theoretically nonpartisan. So, yeah, I think it's structural. I don't think anything was saving the late night shows, but it's hard to really buy this argument that this was obviously the only way anybody could do this when Gutfeld on a cable channel is getting more viewers every night. Clearly, there are more people out there. Clearly, there is a bigger audience out there, and they're just not that concerned with appealing to that audience because they believe that audience is beneath contempt.
Yeah, it'll be fascinating to see where this all lands because they're not the only shows. It's not just late night. I mean, my old stomping ground, like, you just can't, it's like untenable, the idea of having like a different opinion anywhere. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. But Colbert really is in his feelings. He said, like, go F yourself, like to the president on his night back. And I was like, you spent $100 million and you have a whole team of writers. And this is like, I'm not laughing. Like, you can make fun of all of this. You're not laughing. It's just fascinating. Ethan, I have a whole like giant list of other things we were supposed to get to, but I wanted to ask you about 90s Charles Barkley, so I apologize.
Okay.
Come back anytime you want. It's such a pleasure to speak with you. You can follow Ethan's giant Substack, House of Strauss, or his new two-way show, Random Offense, which airs at 4 p.m. on Fridays, and you catch him on X at Sherwood Strauss. Ethan, it's really such a pleasure. Thank you for your time today.
Thanks so much for having me. I just wanted to say I completely agree with your comic book movie take, and I felt less alone
Thank
when you were saying
you.
it. So I
You know
want to
what?
say that.
That's
We
another one
feel
of my
we feel
like
crazy. Yes.
I also feel like that's one of my like hot takes where it's like, you know that thing on Twitter that it's like the guy standing up and he's like the only person standing saying something. And I'm like, we have enough superhero movies. Like, let's give good filmmakers, like young filmmakers
The
and people
guy
like
or
interesting
the one from
perspectives. Yes.
Rapunzel where they have all the knives pointed at him. It's like,
Yes,
yes.
that's how I feel.
Like,
Like we don't
no,
need
mm-mm,
anymore.
no
I don't
more.
understand
I'm
why.
done
And
with
I
it.
feel like it's like every week
I
there's a
just
new
don't,
one.
none of them feel real to me. I might be spectrumy. I might have an inability to
No.
abstract, but it all dates back to when I was maybe high and going to the X-Men movie, and Fraser Crane, Kelsey Grammer was just this giant blue
Yes.
thing.
Yes.
And
Forgot
I just
about that.
remember watching that in an altered state and going, don't believe it.
Uh-huh. Yeah. And they're just not, it's like
That's Blue Fraser.
Blue
yeah, it's
Oyster.
just I don't know. Timothy Chalamet gave an interview and he said Leonardo DiCaprio told him no drugs and no superhero movies, and you'll have a great successful career in Hollywood. And I just feel like there's even like the Fantastic Four. Like my husband really I made him see it on his own. I'm like, I'm not sitting through that shit. No
Yeah.
offense. And like I'm like, I just don't care, and I just don't understand why we have to have 1,000 of them every year. When again, there's so many interesting artists and filmmakers and people that we're friends with and know like that just have such great ideas. And I'm like, we gotta have 90 other superhero movies. So Ethan, Miranda, and I are over it. Go
Yep.
see Eddington.
And
Thank you
listen
so
to
much.
Leonardo DiCaprio actors. Any aspiring actors, take that advice, please. No
My
drugs,
last
no
final
superhero movies.
no drugs, no superhero movies. Want to hear something funny? When I signed with my agent, it was no drugs, no Scientology. This is pretty funny.
And you
I was
didn't
like,
do
"No
either, so
problem."
good for you.
I was like, no problem. That's not a hard thing for me to give you. Go see Eddington, Ethan, and Miranda, and when you both have seen it, come back and we'll talk about it.
I'm gonna
'Cause I
get
think
we
you'll
need
like
to
it.
talk to our friend and get the link. Yes, we need to talk to
Yes,
our
and
friend.
congratulations on your two-way show. Two-way is a really fun place to work.
Yes.
Oh, thank you
Welcome
so
to the
much.
fam.
Thank
Mhm.
you.
All right. See you soon, Ethan.
Hi,
And then
Ethan.
we have one more guest. Sorry, we went a little long with Ethan. Vicky, it's so nice to see you.
Hi, Vicky.
We have Vicky Ward, who's an investigative journalist, a New York Times best-selling author, and she hosts the Vicky Ward Investigates podcast. Her new book is The Idaho 4: An American Tragedy. You can find her on X at Vicky PJ Ward. You know, Vicky, I think America at large has been so obsessed with, the Idaho tragedy and Kohberger. For people that need a reminder, we actually wanted to show this clip of one of the victims, Kaylee Gonclave's sister, the statement she made in court. Number 7, please.
No one is scared of you today. No one is intimidated by you. No one is impressed by you. No one thinks that you are important. You orchestrated this like you thought you were God. Now look at you, begging a courtroom for scraps. You spent months preparing, and still all it took was my sister in a sheath. You work so hard to seem dangerous, but real control doesn't have to prove itself. The truth is, The scariest part about you is how painfully average you turned out to be. The truth is, you're as dumb as they come. Stupid, clumsy, slow, sloppy, weak, dirty. Let me be very clear. Don't ever try to convince yourself you mattered just because someone finally said your name out loud. I see through you. You want the truth? Here's the one you'll hate the most. If you hadn't attacked them in their sleep, in the middle of the night, like a pedophile, Kaylee would have kicked your Thank you.
Obviously, Vicky, that's incredibly powerful. And I just want to thank you for coming on to speak about this. What was your reaction to this when you first saw it? And what inspired you to write an entire book about this tragedy?
So thank you, Megan. You know, when Olivia Gonzalez delivered that incredibly powerful statement, you know, I was sort of crying with emotion. I've got to know her very well. She, you know, in the book, she's amazing. She's kind of like the super sleuth in the book who immediately she hears what's happened to her sister. She lives in California. She's pregnant with her third child. Her husband and she get into the car. They have 2 kids in the back. They drive through the night, and Olivia is working the phones, and she has access to Kaylee's phone records, and so she phones anyone her sister and her best friend Maddie would have spoken to in the last 24 hours. She finds this video of the 2 of them ordering food from the grub truck the hour before they died. And by the time she gets to her parents' house in Rathdrum, Idaho, she's got a whole folder of stuff. And, you know, you see the frustration with the police that the Gonzalez family have, and later with the prosecutors start to build, because it's a struggle to even find someone at that point at the Moscow PD to give this information to. And she discovers that her parents still don't have a point person at the police station. That all being said, minutes after she gave that speech in court, Megan, her father, Steve, texted me how incredibly proud he was of her. And she and I had spoken quite a lot in the days before that. It was so important to her and to her parents that they make what they call a victim impact statement that didn't victimize them, that didn't somehow give this psychopath any further power over their family. And, you know, my personal view is she did an absolutely terrific job of that, because they, you know, this family was against that plea deal because they're worried that, yes, this guy goes to jail for the rest of his life, but could he write a book? Could he give interviews? Could he somehow try and now seize control of the narrative? Yes, he could. And so what they wanted to do was leave that courtroom feeling that they had taken control back. And I think she was amazing.
Oh, yeah. And the courage to do something like that and look your sister's killer in the face and deliver something like that. I mean, and she did it flawlessly. Like, I was wondering if she had memorized it because she was holding her phone, but it's really incredible. As you just said, Kroberger received 4 life sentences without parole for 4 counts of first-degree murder, a 10-year sentence for burglary, and was assessed $270,000 in fines and civil penalties. As part of the plea deal, he also waived his right to appeal. I was a little disappointed in this as well. I think if you kill 4 people in cold-blooded murder, I just, you know, as far as I am concerned, he could have the electric chair. Like, I mean, it's just so disgusting. Why is it that he got, I wouldn't say lenient, but it's more lenient than I would have anticipated of a sentence?
Well, you know, I think his public defender is a very, very good lawyer, and I think she saw her job as to keep him alive, that this was a death penalty case. The death penalty was on the table. She had done actually, I mean, you know, when I and James Patterson, my co-author, originally set out to write this book, we thought we never intended to come out before a trial, but this trial got pushed and pushed back, and then the venue got moved, and Kohberger's defense successfully, you know, went down all sorts of rabbit holes about the methods used when he left his DNA on this knife sheath. In fact, that was his only mistake. You know, other than that, you know, when I go through in the book, the tick tock of the investigation, you really see how weeks went by. And until the labs came back and were able to construct a family tree using these public genetic websites, and they you know, that's how they got to Kohberger. Only then were they able to look at the footage they had of his car and match it to his driver's license and everything else. But he'd been meticulous about, you know, they've never found the murder weapon. There was possibly, we now know, a second weapon used on Kaylee Gonzalez. They don't know what that was. They, you know, they never found his clothes from that night. They couldn't see the front of the car because he was using old Pennsylvania plates, so that, which meant he didn't have to have a plate on the front of the car. I mean, he really had planned this meticulously. But I think after the defense had spent all this time trying to go down the rabbit hole of, you know, is the DNA evidence admissible? The judge had said, yes, it is. And you can't like get into a whole argument at trial about the methodology that was used. They were kind of out of options, which is why at the 11th hour, it was the defense who came to the prosecutors and offered to do the plea deal. And the problem for the families, the three families, or maybe two, but I think there's one still on the fence at this moment in time, who disagreed with it, was it all happened so fast that they really didn't feel like they had any ownership in that decision. You know, one of the themes in the book, Megan, is that Moscow, where this took place, is a liberal college town, obviously in a deeply Republican state, and there were tensions in that town around masking policies and COVID before the murders happened. And then when the murders happened, it all kind of fell apart. But the victims' families too kind of typify some of that divide. One family, the family of Ethan Chapin, has been very supportive of the police and the prosecutors the whole way through. They were fine with the plea deal. They didn't go to the sentencing. The other families have felt very differently. And I think it, you know, the book tells a story in some ways, it's not just a true crime book. It's a portrait of America now.
I think that's so accurate on so many different levels. And I remember when I first heard about this case and the murders, being so horrified. I've been to Iowa many times, and I have not been to Moscow, but I know where it is. And just, you know, you don't think of things like that happening in places in like tiny little towns, and then just these poor college students who are just, you know, having a good time. And obviously it brings up, I think, for everybody, but I think particularly for women, because Brian's a man, you know, what makes someone do something like this? What makes someone commit cold-blooded murder, you know, to people he doesn't know? When you were writing and researching this book, it's a big question, but did you come up with any answers of what his motivation was other than he's a psychopath?
Yeah. And actually, you went and you asked me at the beginning, Megan, why do I want to do it? So I'm the mother of two 22-year-old sons, twins, who are the same age as the victims and who were in college at the time. And that's exactly why I wanted to do it, because something about it just, you know, parents everywhere send their kids off to college. You don't expect something like this to happen to them in their bedrooms. I mean, it's just extraordinary. But also, I'm the mother of sons. And there was something when I looked at, you know, Kohberger, this very obviously intelligent guy, also a college student, PhD student of criminology in his 20s. And, you know, what I did discover was that, you know, two things. One, he was a student of criminal minds. And two, he was a full-blown misogynist. And he had been exposed when he was doing his master's in psychology back in Pennsylvania to the videos made by this guy called Elliot Rodger, who is kind of like a cult hero of what they call the incel movement, involuntary celibate movement. This guy, Elliot Rodger, and there are distinct parallels between what Elliot Rodger, who was a college student out in Santa Barbara, did in 2014 and what Kohberger did. Now, all we know is that Kohberger watched these videos and knew about Elliot Rodger. We also know that by the time he got to do his PhD at Washington State University, his views of women and his behavior towards women was so problematic that it got him into great trouble, and he was about to lose all the funding for his teaching position
Wow.
at
Okay.
Washington State University at the time of the murders. But Elliot Rodger, back in 2014, made a video and wrote a whole manifesto saying that he was going to go out and kill the sorority women who had all of them who'd rejected him. He was a virgin. He made these videos of himself outlining his plans of retribution, and he sent this video to his therapist, who sent it to his mother minutes before he went out and killed 16 people before eventually turning the gun on himself. Elliot Rodger, talked in his book about taking revenge on a woman called Maddie. You know, a lot of the families of the victims and the friends believe that Brian Kohberger's target on the night of the murders in Moscow, Idaho, was not all four of the students he wound up killing, but one of them, Maddie Mogan, because that's whose room he went directly towards. And Kaylee Gonzalez, who he would have found, who he did find in bed asleep with her, was only there by chance. Kaylee had packed up and had left that house several days, if not a week or so before. She was already living at home. And the police do know that Kohberger was staking out the house. So, you know, I think they still, and based on even the latest, all the stuff that was unsealed last week after the lifting of a gag order, the Gonzalez family and others and the friends do believe that Brian Kohberger was targeting Maddie Mogan. But he did an excellent job. You know, I spoke to Chief Fry, who's now chief somewhere else in Washington State, but he was the chief in Moscow at the time of the murders. And, you know, Kohberger did an excellent job at scrubbing his digital footprint. So, you know, this for the police, they're frustrated because they were never able to come up with a definitive why. But for the friends and the families, they believe it was directed towards Maddie Mogan, and they'll never know. I mean, one of the really frustrating things is that there were clearly red flags in his behavior at Washington State University. And I do say in the book, I report how one of his classmates found himself stuck in a car with him, and Kohberger said to him that he believed women belonged in the kitchen and the bedroom. They had no place being on campus, and that Brian Kohberger, could walk into any bar or any social gathering and have his way with any woman he wanted. It was a deeply unpleasant conversation. And this was a man who, meanwhile, upset women so much in the classroom that they walked out in tears. He followed women out to the car. And the families were hoping that if this thing had gone to trial, that they would hear more about all of that. You know, because it touches on this question that's very pervasive right now about the First Amendment on college campuses. When does free speech become hate speech? At what point should colleges intervene? And Washington State University has been very tight-lipped, you know, hiding behind FERPA laws, which they're entitled to do. And so, you know, that I think for the families is very frustrating that they don't get to know everything that went on in plain sight, as it were.
Vicky, I know his phone pinged outside their house like 23 something times. How long do you think he was stalking their home, learning their whereabouts, trying to get friendly with Kaylee's dog so it wouldn't bark if he entered the home and all of that. How long do you think he was stalking them before he made his actual move
So
in November?
according to the probable cause affidavit, 12 times since August.
Wow.
You know, and I will say, you know, the house at the King Road house was demolished,
Right.
somewhat controversially, because the Gonzalez family was very against that, worried that evidence
Well,
could still
yeah,
be
because
there.
if the jury couldn't get a walkthrough. Yeah.
Exactly. But you know, I went and traced sort of the footsteps that the police say that you know, the way that Koberger would have sat in his car and looked at that house. And you know, there is this cul-de-sac that was at the back of the house that has a direct view on, you know, through the trees onto the deck at the back. And there's one bedroom that you could look right into. And that was, unfortunately, that became Maddie's bedroom. And, you know, the idea that he sat there, it's the only place that all the kids, I mean, this is a densely populated student housing area where they all park their cars. And the idea, you know, most of them told me that they would, you know, walk to their cars at night and look at the house, and you could see Maddie lit up. You could see her at her vanity, putting on her makeup, curling her hair. And it was a sort of heartwarming sight to everybody, except obviously this one guy sitting there staring through the trees with a horrible, horrible motive in mind.
You could call it a fixation.
Yeah.
Just really quick before we have to go, because we're going a little bit over time. I know you're one of the premier experts on Epstein, and I always say her name wrong. Ghislaine.
Ghislaine.
I always call her Gasoline. I'm so sorry. It's like the weirdest name. It's like the right before we went on air, President Trump said that he would pardon her, but he has not, but he would possibly at some point. What do you think the likelihood is that she testifies in front of Congress and gets a Trump pardon?
Well, I think she will be very anxious to testify in front of Congress, because having sat through her criminal trial, you know, I know that the focus of that trial was very, very narrow in scope. And so for, you know, certainly a journalist like me who, you know, had to deal with Jeffrey Epstein 20 plus years ago, and for whom there are still a large number of unanswered questions, it was frustrating because we know about Jeffrey Epstein's sex crimes, but we don't know about the system of power that enabled those sex crimes. We don't know about all the details about the money and the men. And so, you know, there would be mentions of bold-faced names on planes and mentions of bold-faced names and the island, but you didn't get to see in her criminal trial, and I'm sure she wasn't asked because it was not part of the scope of the investigation or the indictment, how it all fit together. She certainly has the answers to all of that. She has nothing to lose and everything to gain at this point, so why wouldn't she? And, you know, I think the real question, thorny question here is that if Donald Trump commutes her sentence, pardons her, or, you know, another option is sends her out of the country to England, back to England or to Europe, where she was raised and grew up, and where, you know, people might have a different view of her. She comes from a very well-known, high-profile, once powerful family. You know, I mean, her victims and Jeffrey Epstein's victims are going to understandably be furious. So very, very difficult conundrum.
Vicky, what do you think about this? Sorry, Megan. What do you think about this narrative flip that Ghislaine is possibly a victim of Jeffrey Epstein? That's the theory that's been going around over the last few days.
Right. So you can't, it's like comparing apples and oranges. Ghislaine Maxwell grew up in immense privilege, very, very wealthy, well-connected father. You know, she went to Oxford, she speaks millions of languages. It was her Rolodex. not Jeffrey Epstein's, that had presidents and heads of state and billionaires in it, and that became something that was very useful for Jeffrey Epstein. But originally it was her father's and it became hers. So she in no way you can't compare her to a 16-year-old impoverished,
Yeah.
absolutely.
I'm trying to understand, why is this narrative being forced on us?
Right. Having, what is true is that her father was a horrendous man. It was ended up when he died in very strange circumstances, floating in the ocean, having supposedly fallen off his boat. It emerged that he had stolen the money from from the pensions of all of his employees.
God.
At the media
Madoff.
company that exactly, and Ghislaine's two of her brothers then went on trial. They were acquitted for being his accomplices in that. Meanwhile, Ghislaine Maxwell was now in New York in her 20s, and by her standards, she was impoverished. She was suddenly without money, and her father had told her that in life, whatever you do, quote unquote, you do whatever it takes to please your man. Jeffrey Epstein was sort of the first person who kind of took her under his wing. And the tragedy of this story, in some ways, is that, a woman who had every tool at her disposal and who had been given every advantage did not have the self-confidence or self-esteem to believe she could build a life or a career for herself without relying on Jeffrey Epstein. And then when he got tired of her as his girlfriend, which she did very quickly, then resorting to do these unspeakable things for him in order to, one, keep his interest, but two, to be paid by him. So you can't compare that to the stories of schoolgirls in the Palm Beach area who see flyers on the wall and then wind up in Jeffrey Epstein's massage room.
Yeah.
The two things are not remotely the same thing. Her story is a complicated one, but I'm not saying it justifies at all what she ended up doing.
Vicky, everything about the Epstein case confuses me more. Every time I read more, I just get more confused. Obviously I know he's a horrific monster and he abused all these women, but his connections to everyone, there's a picture of Ghislaine Maxwell, at Chelsea Clinton's wedding. You can see her in the photo while Chelsea's giving her vows.
Yeah.
Respectfully, there were no pedophiles at my wedding that I'm aware of, thank God. But it's it's so many connections. Bill Gates' wife has come out and said that she left him over his connections with Jeffrey Epstein. It's so much wealth and power.
There's rumors that Donald Trump and Melania met each other through Jeffrey Epstein.
I've never heard that.
That's what I've been hearing this week. Yeah.
Well, because I'll tell you why. Because Jeffrey Epstein's main financial backer in the 1990s was Leslie Wexner, who was the owner of Victoria's Secret, biggest sort of modeling forum in the world. So these are circles that overlap in the extreme. In the 1990s, we know that Melania Trump was a prominent model in New York. So it's not and her modeling agency was run by a guy called Paolo Zampoli, who's now got a position in the Trump administration. And his biggest client was Leslie Wexner and Victoria's Secret. So, this is a tiny little world.
Do you think, just final question on this, do you think part of the reason why we don't have more information, one theory with our mutual friend Jessica Krause is that there's so many people implicated that it would just be cataclysmic for basically everyone in the highest echelons of financial, political, and cultural power? Because I still am confused. Why can't we just know? Why can't we see whatever information they have? I know people are saying there's no strict files, but just I would like to know as much information as is available to anyone, including people at the FBI. I do think the American public is owed that.
Yeah, I agree. And I don't know. I think that Jeffrey Epstein knew a tremendous number of powerful people all around the world, as did Ghislaine Maxwell. But, you know, it doesn't, you don't need 100 people to prop you up financially. You only need one if they're wealthy enough. And there will be some stuff, I suspect, that's buried in the discovery. I mean, some of these victims have mentioned other names. We know that Jeffrey Epstein liked, you know, he wanted to pay. If we, you know, Alan Dershowitz has spoken on the record about this, that when Alan Dershowitz was accused by Virginia Roberts, he ended up settling that case, and she said she must have been mistaken. But Jeffrey Epstein went to Alan Dershowitz and said, you know, I'll pay for this to go away. Please don't fight it. Dershowitz said, no, I'm going to fight it. But so there certainly has been quite a lot of hush money spread around, and I think we are owed, you know, information about who got paid what. And I think, you know, this is really the questions that are being asked about Jeffrey Epstein are really about questions in how soft power works.
Yeah.
You know, how ultimately why did Alex Acosta, the US attorney in Florida, agree to get rid of the federal charges and give him a cushy plea deal? You know, who spoke to who? I think that's what people want to know. I suspect that Ghislaine Maxwell, well, I know that she has all the answers to that. She knows, I mean, what she says, to be honest, is probably going to be more informative than what's in the files. But we go back to where we started this conversation. That is problematic for the victims.
Yeah, it's all America. One thing I can tell you is America is not going to stop being interested in this. Everyone I know is interested in this. And I think the idea that this is just something, you know, journalists and political hosts are talking about, I think that's a fallacy. I think the average American is interested in this. Vicky, thank you so much for coming on. You can come back anytime. I find your work utterly fascinating. You can pick up Vicky's new book with James Patterson, The Idaho 4: An American Tragedy. She hosts the Vicky Ward Investigates podcast, and she has a very popular Substack, and you can follow her on X, Vicky PJ Ward. Thank you so much, Vicky. I really appreciate it. There's her book right there. And we really appreciate it. Come back anytime.
Thank you,
for having me,
Vicky.
Megan. Thanks, Maria.
Wonderful. All right, you guys, thank you so much. We've had a wonderful time talking to all of you, and we'll be back again, same time, same place on Wednesday. We went way over today, but
I
that's
could
what
have talked
happens
to
when we
her
have
for
such,
like 5
such interesting
hours.
guests. I could have
God,
continued talking to her too, but I think
I'm
Ashley's had work
obsessed with that
so,
Idaho case. Oh,
I am
God.
all fascinated. I love crime. I love
It happened on my birthday, so it's
I
like
don't love crime, but I'm fascinated by true crime,
true
like everyone
crime.
else.
Sure,
Yes.
sure. Yes.
All right, we'll be back Wednesday. Thank you,
We'll be
guys.
here.
See you soon.